because he chose a niche, he specialized in it, he demonstrated, I'll say this in like a nice way, to old people like you and I, he demonstrated that how old did you say I was?
Really old people like me.
I walked uphill both ways to school. And that's the advantage that you guys have. You have the apparent advantage. So all of these guys that are, whatever the industry is, right? Whatever the local businesses are in here in Chicago, they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to AI. Like, this panel's talking about all this stuff that's like way up here and super sophisticated. I'm talking caveman level sophistication. They can't even log into Instagram. They're not even on Instagram or Facebook. Why don't you help them using AI tools? You want a job? You want to make money? Help these people who have no idea what they're doing. The lawn care people, the plumbers, even the personal injury attorneys, they're getting ripped off. I talked to a guy last week, he's paying $20,000 a month to an agency that's ripping him off, doing nothing. He'll probably try to sue me because he's an attorney. The other guy. But that's the opportunity.
But we've had this before with the website developers.
It's just another wave of the same thing.
Yeah.
And social media management.
Yeah, but in the nonprofit space, that sector has the greatest to gain because they're the most under-resourced area. They often rely on volunteers and very limited budgets. And so AI could really help that sector. In the event I ran recently, there was a room full of nonprofit leaders and only 2 were using AI in the whole room. And they were there. I demonstrated something on ChatGPT and it was the first time a few of them had even seen it. And I know in Australia you think we're backward, but I know this could be the case. Some people would just think AI, I don't need to know about that, I'm not going to. But once they see what it can do, that's what I love the most, is you just see their eyes light up and go, wow. And so that's a real opportunity. Particularly if you're passionate about a particular cause, find a nonprofit that is devoted to that cause and then see how you can help them with AI.
The Pew Internet data that's been out in the last few weeks suggests that, roughly half of people are at least aware of AI, maybe have tried it. The younger demographic is more likely to use it, similar to what we had with social media. So it does seem like there's a great opportunity there because among the older demographic, there's a lot of fear and concern.
Yes.
The AI industry hasn't really convinced a lot of people that it's safe, that it's good to use.
Yeah, but there's so many. So one of the case studies that was shown at that event, there's it's a charity road race that happens. They don't go very fast. It's more about the distance. But and there's only one guy who runs the whole thing, and you can imagine the race goes 24 hours a day over about 5 days. And so people are calling him all hours of the night and night and day, asking him things. And so he would literally do that. But he hired a company who spoke at the event who created an AI persona. So it was an AI chatbot that was voice and trained it on all the information from the organisation and all the questions that are normally asked. And so now it identifies out of hours and says, I'm an AI chatbot, but it answers the questions, and if it can't, then it calls the guy. So he gets so much more sleep now because he doesn't have to answer the phone at all hours of the day and night.
Well, I do see a role, nonprofits that we've worked with in the past, often in a small operation, the person who's straight out of college hired as a social media manager might have 8 or 10 other duties. So either AI is going to be one more thing or an assistant that can help them.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's having those rules as well, because I think organisational leaders who think their staff aren't using it are so wrong. And it's called shadow AI, and this is where there aren't any rules, and employees are using it and they're just using it in whatever tools, in whatever way. So not having those rules in there is a big risk, but once you have those in place and some processes and guardrails around it, it can be really effective.
And just as we had with social media influencers, Karen, we've talked a lot about the need for transparency.
Yes.
Honesty, the values that we tend to support and hold at the university. How do we get that out there to the practitioners to make sure that they're getting, is it going to take the Federal Trade Commission, like it took with influencers, to set the boundaries, the guardrails?
I think that there's going to have to be some sort of policy for transparency because, like you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, about the whole risk of misinformation, disinformation, fake news. Like, I think that there needs to be that level of yes, this was created by AI. And we're kind of seeing this with different policies. Like at the University of Louisville, there's a policy of if you're utilizing AI for your classes, like how you would cite it, like in terms of writing, like what prompt and what tool that you're using. I do feel like the FTC will probably follow suit, like with influencers, because I think if people see, oh, this is a real person or this is a real image, but it's not, you're misleading, and so it's kind of going back to the traditional, like, false advertising and some of these other issues. Like, you don't want to mislead audiences, like, to think that this is real when it's not. So I would say that honesty is the best policy and being transparent is key. So I think having some sort of policy saying, yes, this was not created by AI or this was created by AI, we're probably going to, like influencers, it took them a while to kind of follow suit with like the ads and the sponsored posts, but still people forget to add that still to this day and they get hefty fines. But I think it's important, to have that conversation because you don't want to mislead people.
And the survey results suggest that people feel like they can tell sometimes that something doesn't seem quite right. I mean, I've seen some television ads already that look, obviously some of the things that are going on in the ad were generated somehow, but even the anchors in the ads don't look quite human to me yet.
Yeah.
Well, and even like with Cannes Lions this past year, they had to rescind a couple of awards because there were some agencies that used AI but didn't disclose it. So that also was something that we saw being discussed. And I think that, all these different cases, whether it's commercials, people are able to say, oh yeah, that's definitely AI, but then there's some that are really really close. It's kind of like, I think Clemson University had this one research program that kind of said, can you identify the troll who's been basically spreading misinformation? And like, I know I took that, survey and I'm like, it's really hard, to kind of identify what's real and what's not. Same thing with AI. As the tools advance, it's going to be harder for us, but I think it is important to be transparent.
I think when audiences can tell, there is a lot of backlash,
Yes.
particularly when the brand doesn't disclose it.
Yes.
So there was recently Vodafone in Germany used AI-generated brand ambassadors, and they copped a lot of backlash for that. And recently as well, Will Smith, did you see he had a music video and the crowd was AI generated and it was fine from a distance, but when you zoomed in, like people had feet for hands and it looked really wrong. And and people like I don't know if you saw the comments on Instagram from that, it was pretty hilarious.
And there's even that level of like authenticity and kind of staying true to classics. Like I know the Wizard of Oz, set up in the Sphere in Las Vegas, got a lot of backlash because they utilize AI to kind of enhance some of the things in the movie. And people are like, well, that's a classic. Like you're kind of changing things that weren't really there before. Like what's the line between restoring classics versus not? And I'm always, interested, like I talk about the Dolly Museum, and they recreated Dolly through AI, and that his persona's there. I'm like, did he agree to that? That his persona, his voice, and his interaction was going to be used in that way? So it's about questioning if it's not like why we should, not only why should we use it, but should we? There's going to be cases where it's like kind of where for businesses saying, yeah, we could use this, but should we? In this case, like if I found we have a lot of healthcare professionals like in Louisville, and there's times where they're like, absolutely not. Like we don't even want to risk, with HIPAA and everything with AI.
Yeah.
So that's one industry that they're like very hesitant.
And in communication, we think of ourselves foundationally as creative storytellers. And I know the class has had a number of concerns expressed about copyright, intellectual property, as AI scrapes the internet looking for answers. And the Copyright Office itself has already issued a memorandum about disclosure, and disclosing how much of the work product was due to AI and how much is creativity. Within large clients, organizations, within your business, how do you preserve that creativity and storytelling? Because isn't that part of your value proposition?
Well, creativity and storytelling you can break down into different components. There's like the pure fake generative AI, and there's all the way down to authentic, real stories. And I think with this whole discussion of, did this thing really happen? Did Jake Paul really kiss that one guy? Or was that AI? Or, did Trump really say that? There's going to be so much backlash to that, and because the AI will get so good that it'll have to revert back to, did those things really happen? And what is actually true? Back to like fact checking. So you guys remember when Cambridge Analytica happened?
Yes.
So I was summoned into CNN, into their headquarters, and I argued with Zuckerberg on TV in front of a few million people. And I crushed him. Because the question was, do you think Facebook should be regulated? They already gave me the questions in advance, which I know is like not fair in journalism on live TV. But it was this whole question around what is real, And can the Russians or Chinese influence our election by running ads and using social media and bots and paying influencers without disclosing them, because there's networks of that kind of thing. So we had this whole discussion around that. And I was there 5 more times, in fact, because every time Zuckerberg would open his mouth, they would invite me back to CNN. And he doesn't, people say, do you know Mark Zuckerberg? Does he know who you are? He does not like me, right? But it goes back to the truth of what is real. So on my phone, do you remember, Karen, when, because you're the social media professor among all the other social media professors, right? But you'd never been to Facebook before.
No.
So what happened there?
Well, you invited me, about 10 years ago.
And remember, we met with a bunch of people there, and there is proof of you and I
Yeah.
at Facebook and doing lots of these things, right? And so this is on my iPhone, and this is before ChatGPT. This was 10 years ago. There is proof that you and I were actually in Menlo Park eating ice cream and barbecue and
Yeah.
walking around and being around the campus and doing all that. And because there's real photos and videos and all that kind of stuff, those are the raw ingredients that then can be traced all the way through to the final products, where AI is the processor, right? Remember, the raw ingredients, the chef processes, or the AI processes using tools, which are the AI. So if you look at any generative derivative product, you should be able to trace it back to the facts of what is actually true. Kind of like this copyright, or so I would reframe this question of creativity and derivative work and IP as in how much modification is there from the original raw source material. So when that FTC or all that stuff came out with Zuckerberg and Cambridge Analytica, the Federal Trade Commission asked me to come to DC. And first time I went there, I was in a room full of lawyers. I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to prison, right? Because they were asking me about how, because ad networks work and data and whatnot. And it was the same group of people that were in charge of the do not call. Remember the whole like do not call, do not spam, you put your name on that list. And so they wanted to do a do not retarget on social media, or do not collect all my social data. And now that team is trying to create this, do not use my data, because there's even more data in AI, because people are like uploading their sensitive information and then using the thing as an advisor. Like there's way more than social media, right?
So more granular.
Yeah, for sure. So now that team of lawyers is trying to figure out what are the rules. Like even 10 times worse than the whole influencer disclosure thing. You think that's tough? This AI thing's 10 times harder, right? And so I said, well, here's the kind of data that the AI engines are collecting. Here's the kind of data the search engines have. Here's the data here's how social, because I'm a search engine engineer, so I understand like how the data is processed, right? And I said, here's how the data is processing. Here's some safeguards you might put in place. Here's some disclosures you might have. Why don't you put these certain things in place? And here's what the lawyers said. They said, we could, but remember, when we are writing laws, those things are permanent. It's like getting a tattoo. So we intentionally have to be slow and careful in writing these laws. And they're saying, I understand what you're saying, where this is what it should be, but remember, we're regulators, and we're talking about what is legal or not what is ethical. So you can't tell people, like laws are only do not do these certain things. You can't tell people you need to be honest and truthful and all that kind of stuff and creative. So the real solution to this whole thing is in education. Yes, there has to be policy and safeguards and laws and all that, but it's education that has to precede that, because this is like the final barrier before the car drives off the cliff.
And right now, the barriers to entry are pretty low.
Yeah,
There's
it's a
no
free-for-all.
real
So,
barriers.
and the gatekeeping is quite low.
Yeah.
So we have to be in a position, just like we are with news and information, to be our own editors, essentially.
Well, even Sam Altman from OpenAI was interviewed saying, don't put information in there, because particularly people are using it like their therapist and telling the most intimate details about their lives and asking for advice. And I think if you saw a therapist, I think the law in the US, don't quote me because I am Australian, there is some barrier there where if police or there was some case against you,
patient confidentiality.
they can't, but they can go to OpenAI and get anything. There's nothing stopping them. So if you're giving up this information willingly, like there is nothing to stop. If there was a case against you for OpenAI giving it to.
Well, and Meta, Facebook, Instagram, X, these platforms have collected information.
Can I tell you something
over
that
a
might get me
long period of
canceled?
time, right?
Let me tell you something.
Oh, please.
We would get requests from the federal government. So when I was at Yahoo, and we had Yahoo Mail, and you guys are not old enough to remember this, but we would get these requests from the regulators on here's somebody who is like a terrorist or some bad person, pull all their searches, pull all their mail, pull everything they've done, like if they've traded stock or they've gone to Yahoo Sports to look at their teams, fantasy football, and we would have to give all that information over to the authorities. Otherwise, I go to jail, right? Because my team would have to do that. So even though I know OpenAI has these disclosures and whatnot that says your data's safe and all that kind of stuff, I'm telling you, as someone who's been on the inside, government has all that data. Okay, we're not worried about the Chinese and TikTok and all that. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, by the way. I'm as Chinese as Panda Express. Right? People say, "What do you think about the Chinese?" No, I'm an American. My English is as good as yours. Right? But it's not about China or Russia or this other stuff. Just assume anything that you've put into your phone is being recorded, even if it's off. It's being,
But wasn't Cambridge Analytica about bad actors?
Cambridge Analytica was about these bad actors that would use blackmail to have public officials do certain things. Cambridge Analytica, and this is what I went on CNN to talk about and all that, Cambridge Analytica never had the technical capability to be able to build the models that they claimed that they could do. Because Zuckerberg changed the API, V1 of the API allowed anyone who had the key, the
Which
application
was the pipe
key,
to pull data.
to be able to grab any information about not only people using the apps, but all the friends of those people, which then would multiply, because the average person had 160 friends, so you can multiply that out to 200 million people. But because of this stuff that happened, don't quote me on the exact date, but about 2009, they changed I'm like one of 3 people in the world that understands this, it's so weird. They changed the API so that the only people you could pull are first level connections, and then you had to have a user explicit key. So Cambridge Analytica claimed, oh, we have all this data, and we can build these models and target people based on, and then so people would just believe that because they didn't know any better. They weren't sophisticated enough, like an engineer like me, to know what's actually possible. And so they marketed that they had this capability, when really the news feed itself automatically does the targeting. When you're on TikTok or Instagram, that automatically is trying to serve you things that it thinks you're interested in, right? It doesn't require a Cambridge Analytica because the power of the AI is in the network, not in the advertising.
The algorithm itself is a form of generative AI, isn't
Yeah.
it? So we've had this for a while.
Yeah.
Well, you call machine learning, they call it AI, but most of the time when people talk about AI, they're actually talking about machine learning.
So something that has come up, I know, here in this market is that newspapers, the ones that had been able to pivot to the digital world and get subscribers, are now seeing, they say, because of AI, a big drop in hits on their websites, which is how they monetize what their work is to be able to sell advertising there. Is this a problem that can be solved in terms of trends going forward? Or are they in deep trouble? More trouble than they've already been in this digital shift.
I was with a buddy who runs, I won't say his name because he'll get in trouble. I've gotten in trouble a couple
Yeah,
times.
please don't get us in trouble too, Dennis.
So a couple people who work at Google who are in charge of the AI, Danny's met one of them, we had dinner with one of them. I said, we were actually in Australia like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Because then ChatGPT kind of, started to become a thing 3 years ago. And I said, insert name, why don't you, I know you guys have the technology to do all of this. You've been sitting on it for years. Why don't you release it? Because everyone's using ChatGPT for that. People are going to do this instead of searching. You've heard all these people say that, right? Mm-hmm. And he said to me, well, because in our tests, we've demonstrated when we have a generative AI answer, a consolidated answer instead of the 10 blue links, we have less clicks on ads. So we can't do it because it would hurt the mothership on how we make money. And so that's why you see AI, generative AI, it says like generative AI, those results, AI assistant, all that. They only show it in half the results, and they're showing it primarily in non-commercial queries because those are the ones that don't impact advertising revenue. Remember, everything that's free, like using search engines and social media and Google Maps and YouTube, all that stuff that's free to you is because it's ad supported. So the underlying network.
And our data support it.
Yeah, so they're trying to decide, all right, well, I need to make money. And so it's not like people think Google's dumb and well, ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever is going to eat their lunch because people are going to talk to ChatGPT instead of going to Google. I guarantee you, those guys at Google, those are the smartest people out there. They absolutely have seen this thing coming years ahead. No one has an answer. Even Sam Altman, he just started last week a new advertising division inside OpenAI. They have not figured it out. Nobody, as of today, has figured out how to generate money in a subscription-driven environment, right? Because right now it's like the $20 a month plus subscription or whatever. Have any of them figured out advertising?
Not
No.
yet.
So no one's figured it out. So it's not like Google doesn't know or they're about to be overtaken, right?
I mean, they have investors, but we're not sure they are headed toward profitability in the near term.
It could end up being a big Ponzi. It could be like WeWork. OpenAI could be like WeWork. You heard me say it.
Well, Google is renovating the old State of Illinois building downtown, so it's a large structure. It would seem to suggest that they think they're in a good position going forward.
Well, the two founders of Google last week said that AI is a win at all costs game. Every dollar. They're willing to lose all the money they have in the bank to not lose this game. That's how severe it is.
Going forward, I know a couple of the students had asked this question, and you've touched on it at the surface level, but dig down a little bit deeper. The hard skills that students should have going forward, and I'd like everybody to respond to this, because there was a point at which a lot of us were looking at for example, our journalism students need to know programming, those kinds of things. What's your take in Australia and Louisville and Las Vegas?
Look, I don't think I don't think you need to know programming as a communication student, but it's writing, it's presenting, it's relationship management, it's those things, even though that's more a soft skill, but just any form of communication I think is really, really important. Whether you're communicating visually, whether you're communicating on camera, whatever it is, just knowing how to tell a story and share information in a way to a particular audience that people in that audience will understand. And research is also really, really important so you can understand that audience.
So your students in the Bird's Nest, are there specialists inside the agency?
Yeah, there are. I mean, we do have like the typical writers, researchers, content creators, and then we actually have individuals who are part of our operations team. So they do everything from like HR, but like kind of cultivating a culture. But fundamentally, like one of the goals that I have for the students is be a good person, like have empathy, because the world, needs a little bit more kindness. And so that's kind of been like, I mean, it's one of those things where like I give them the technical and skills that they need to have for the industry. But at the end of the day, what I definitely tell them is like, what makes you stand out is how you treat people. How do you build those relationships, like, and kind of lead with generosity, be empathetic, and kind of taking, as Karen, you mentioned, like the soft skills that we sometimes kind of overlook, but they're so valuable today in the age of technology. Like if you get to help someone, say like with what Dennis has done. I mean, Dennis is, like one of the best people to really educate and empower and be generous to others. Like if you are knowledgeable with the skills and you have that really adds that benefit. So that's one thing that I didn't really anticipate that would be like a main thing that I would emphasize like for the agency, but I thought I'm seeing a lot in the industry, like lack of mentorship or competitiveness or gatekeeping. And I'm like, I don't want my students to walk out into that world with that mentality. I want them to be better. So my only request for them when they graduate is to pay it forward. Like with the mentorship and culture that we've tried to build in the Bird's Nest, I'm like, make sure you continue that on with your own job and mentor and give back. And so, but yeah, empathy and kindness is definitely one thing that I would say is a key thing that I try to teach the students.
So that's one of those old skills
Yes.
of, building trust with
Yes.
clients,
Yes.
with news sources, with people in the communications industry. You're more likely to be able to collaborate if they trust you, right?
Well,
Absolutely.
trust that's the essential ingredient for everything to go well, is to have someone trust you. And to build that trust, you have to be dependable and do what you say you're going to do and actually, walk the talk. It's so important.
The
I want
industry
to
perspective.
echo on what Dr. Karen Freberg said. So I'm going to demonstrate it rather than talk
Okay.
about it, okay?
Yeah.
So hopefully Verizon's working here in downtown Chicago. So I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll say, hey, hello?
Hey there. Absolutely no sugarcoating.
Okay,
coming
okay,
here.
I'm going to interrupt you. So Dr. Karen Freberg, who's a social media professor, I've known her for a long time. We both were actually track athletes, D1,
Yeah.
at Southern Methodist University, and she was an intimidating person before. But anyway, she's helped so many people. She cares about helping young adults. I see that, you know, even in late night hours and whatnot, she's constantly introducing people to her students and doing everything she can. She's like mothering over. I think that's why her agency is called The Bird's Nest. Yeah. And we've had so many great experiences. I want to write an article honoring her and interview her on a podcast for like 10 minutes after our discussion here at Loyola University. What do you think? What are 2 or 3 questions I can ask her?
Absolutely. Let's keep it real and toss in a bit of cleverness. Dr. Freberg sounds like a legend in the making, and it's always cool to honor someone who's basically running the bird's nest of mentorship. So here are a couple of questions you could throw her way. You might ask her something like, Karen, you've been a kind of social media den mother for so many young professionals. What's the one piece of tough love advice you find yourself giving your students or mentees over and over again? That way you get a bit of her signature wisdom. Another fun one could be, if you had to compare nurturing a young professional in social media to a track event, what kind of race are they running? Are they in a marathon, a relay, or just a series of sprints? And since a little humor never hurts, what's one myth about social media careers that you wish you could just put to bed? You know, like hitting the snooze button forever. That should give you a mix of heartfelt...
That's great. Now watch this. I'm going to go into agent mode in ChatGPT. I want you to round up everything in my Google Photos and everything where you can see Dr. Freberg has done some incredible things. For example, she's done a ton of stuff for Stu Kent and Stuart Draper, and I have been friends. And Karen was mentioned multiple times at that mastermind that Stuart had a couple weeks ago about how she's just such an icon, helping other professionals and just sharing and pouring into other people beyond what a university professor is supposed to do. I want you to turn that into an authoritative article showing that, like, this is the best example of mentorship, showing the things that Karen Freberg has done in the community, lecturing, hanging around with Dr. Karen Sutherland and Jeremy Lipschultz and other folks, and put that on a blog post on DennisU.com. You can go ahead and hit publish. You don't need to run it through draft. Make sure it meets our article guidelines, which you already know about, and make sure to include specific photos of Dr. Karen and I, especially like when we were at Facebook, so we can show that this is real instead of fluff. And now I execute this, and while we're talking and having dinner, it's going into agent mode. It opens up its own computer with the browser and memory, and it's kind of weird because you can sit here and just like watch the thing work. It's like, now add post, now insert image, now do this, now do that, you know? And then, like you said,
Yeah.
it'll come back and say, well, what about this and what about that? And you give it feedback like
Yeah.
a young adult,
Yeah.
right? And see, so it's already logging in, it's doing the research, it's doing all these things here. Isn't that cool?
But I sensed that our side of the table was
I
a
would
little
like to see
concerned
it.
about the publish
yeah,
button.
I would like to see it before
Yeah.
it goes live. That's just me.
Me too. What
Yeah.
about you, Karen?
Um,
It's about you. So.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It does.
well, I would say, I mean, one of my lessons in social media is embrace chaos, you know, so, I mean, I kind of live in organized chaos in social media, but it's like, if you know, I trust Dennis, and we've had a good relationship, so I trust him, so I'm like, yeah, hit publish.
And I do the hit publish just because when it's on a blog that doesn't get a lot of traffic, I'd rather just look at it from here rather than
Yeah.
have to log in and whatnot. But you're right, you could say, because 99% of the time, it'll put it in draft mode, and it'll also just get stuck. It'll work for like 10 or 15
Okay.
minutes and just stop, and then you're like, no, keep going, no, make it like this, make it like that. So normally it does take 5 or 6 little tweaks until you get to a final, or what did you call it, like different rounds of like managing every step along the way, whatever you said earlier.
Yeah, there's different
Supervising.
stages in the creative process,
Yeah.
content
So who
creation
gets the
process.
byline, Dennis or the
Yeah.
agent?
If you don't know, who should it be? I mean, can you tell? So let's put it this way. The source material is real and raw. So I'm always making sure, like if it starts generating random images or starts hallucinating, we have different prompts inside of there that say don't do that. Always make sure it traces back to real, authentic experiences and whatnot, because I never wanted to make stuff up. I never wanted to exaggerate. I never wanted to just say like, oh, Dr. Karen Freberg is an amazing person. She's such a good social media professor, and she was a track guy. Like, no, what are the factual things? And that is not just hallucination. If you go all the way back to search engines, they have something called EEAT, experience, authority, what is it? Experience, expertise, see? Authority and trust. In other words, tracing back to real ingredients. We're just supervising the processing of real meats, all like minimally processed all the way through to like a steak, right? You don't have to add a lot of seasoning. You don't have to, it's not like hot dog meat. Raw steak, or, real quality A5 Wagyu like we have in Japan. When you go and you'll find that how delicious it is. Lightly processed all the way through is fantastic. Great ingredients don't require much processing. But anyway, to the question earlier, I think that you were asking, what kind of skills do these folks need? I would think the number one thing, the reasoning, critical thinking, soft skills, the number one thing you can do to develop those skills is start a podcast and interview people in the industry that you want to be with. Interview professors. Interview people that, sure, he took off. Interview anyone who has a position of authority, or because you would not believe when you reach out to people, they will say yes to you. And that builds your experience, that builds EEAT. That's raw material that you can use AI tools to process. You can honor these people, and then when it's time to go for a job or start your business, the people that you want to reach, you've already built this connection and trust and credibility and relationship, and you've already built that because you've done this podcast along the way. You will not believe how easy it is to get what you want when you build that.
And it builds your social network on LinkedIn and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because you're going to connect with
everything.
those people.
The podcast does all of those things.
Yeah.
Back to your blog post, though.
Let's see how it is.
Are you going to have a transparency line at the bottom that discloses that AI wrote this?
Oh, that's a can of worms. Because we think, here, let me answer it
I
this
mean,
way.
isn't the FTC going to say at some point, that's deceptive? Because it looks like, Dennis, you wrote
Because
that.
in China and the European Union, they're coming out with laws to say that you have to do that, and particularly on social platforms.
Yeah.
Because the ethics of it would suggest, be transparent and disclose.
Yeah. Well, we use AI in everything, but it's still real and original and authentic. So there's such an AI. People are just so like there's a wave, right? It was a crypto bro. Now I'm a crypto expert, and then I'm a social media expert. Now I'm an AI expert. Like every couple of years, like there's the new thing, and all of a sudden the experts from the previous thing are now the experts in this new thing, right? And so in a year or two from now, you're not going to see all this AI this and AI that, because people are tired of it, right? I've spoken at I don't know how many conferences in the last 3 years where it's just like AI, like we get drunk based on how many shots people say AI, But here's this. So, are you an expert in electricity? No. Are you an expert in using a cell phone or typing on a
I'm
keyboard?
good at it, but
You're
I'm
good
not
at
an
it. But
expert.
it is just so embedded. In 2 years from now, it'll be so embedded into everything that we do. You don't have to say that you use electricity or use AI. It's just like, of course I know how to connect to the Wi-Fi. Of course I know how to type on a computer. Of course I can do these basic skills. It becomes such a basic thing, you don't need to mention it.
So does the marketplace correct itself at some point? I mean, right now I know one of the students' concerns is about AI music being posted on like Spotify and other sources, and then tagging real artists and muddying the water about whose creativity is present here. I mean, that's got to work itself out somehow, doesn't it?
And that's a real thing. I forget the artist, but she received a DM on Instagram saying, "I love your new album," and she said, "I haven't put anything out." And what had happened is someone had trained AI on her whole catalogue and brought out a new album that sounded exactly like her. Her fans couldn't even tell the difference, and put it on Spotify.
Yeah.
And it's happening with authors as well, with their work.
And movies.
Yeah.
Well, in our work too, like with research, because there's been, I know one big publisher on the research academic front that said, oh yeah, we're using our AI tool with all of the research that's ever been published in our journals. And it's like, we didn't give that permissions for our work to be used in that way. So that was interesting to watch.
We're in our last half hour, and I know students have some questions, so if you have a question, line up over here. Here's the mic. And while you are getting up here to ask questions, I want to ask the panel, is there any question that we haven't asked you that you think we should ask about what's happening with AI and education and social marketing?
Now that is a good question.
I know you all were talking earlier, and I'm sure we'll talk later at dinner too, but we haven't gotten to all the questions that we could possibly ask. But what concerns you? What excites you about this?
I think what's exciting is that as all of us have kind of worked in social media, like I love the fact that like that things are changing every day. So you're not doing something the same thing every day, because I think I would go nuts if I was an accountant, because I had an accounting class that kind of gave me trauma, in school. But I'm excited with the fact that like there's so much change happening and so much, like advances happening. But I would say that the thing that, in terms of looking ahead, like as Dennis mentioned, is like I think AI is going to be kind of something where it's not like something that you could be an expert in, but it's like part of every job. But my question is what's next? Like, what is the next wave happening after AI? Like, and how do we prepare for that?
And it reminds me that you just dropped today a blog post on
Yes.
Substack.
Yes.
And I saw some data that said that while news publishers are having declines in hits on their websites, Substack is
Huge.
on the
Yeah.
rise. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that's happening in the middle of all this. But this is about your AI portfolio, building
Yes.
your AI portfolio.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that there are ways for students to position themselves in the job market with
Yes.
that portfolio.
I was inspired by this because like we've had a couple of AI forums in Louisville. Like there's a lot of agencies and like everyone's having the same questions. But of course, like one of the things that I'm realizing is that everyone's kind of in these different groups and silos, and where I think it's important for us to all come together. But on the agency side, like I was talking to a few people, and I'm like, well, you're saying that you are looking for candidates who understand AI, but those expectations are not being really directly communicated to educators or even students. Like they're like saying, yeah, no AI, but I'm like, well, we're not mind readers. Like, what do you exactly you mean? And so I proposed, and I talked about like one of the things I do for the Bird's Nest is have them build out portfolios of their work. And I'm like, well, what if we created a section just on AI? Like, what would that look like? And so with my Substack, I'm assigning my students to write their own newsletter in one of my classes this semester, so I figure I better practice what I preach with my students and do it myself. So I was inspired, like what that would look like, and I think that's something that I haven't really had a lot of conversations, like in this social media, professors community that we're a part of, but I think it's something for us to kind of spur. Let's see, like, how can we best prepare students for like what we're looking at. So I had a few suggestions on how to like go about in crafting, like how to frame your skill sets in a way that would potentially make you stand out, like from the crowd. So
I think one of the best ways of using it is the repurposing of social media content.
Yeah.
So taking a long form piece and then using a range of AI tools you could get the transcript and generate a blog post out of it. You could then put it into Opus Clip and create smaller clips. You could generate the captions to go with it. You can make caption tiles for Instagram. There's just so many different ways that you could repurpose, and AI makes it so much easier.
And
now.
you do a great job with your, news art. Like Karen Sutherland has a regular segment on ticker news in Australia.
Yeah.
Like she does a great job in terms of positioning her thought leadership, like with video and AI. And so I think that's really a good model to look at.
Yeah, because I mean, so creating social media content it's a challenge, and it takes so much work. But if you can show employers that you can speed up that process, overseeing it, of course, but speeding it up and get multiple pieces of content out of the same long form piece, that is a skill that not many people have.
And how much money you can save them.
By doing it, yeah.
But then they can't, you don't want to make sure that it's like, hire me with this salary, but I'm still saving you money, so I think that's
absolutely.
important, so.
It's interesting because some of the rules, the technology changes, but the rules, the tools change, but the rules don't always change.
Yeah.
In the sense that, local television news, for example, does a lot with repurposing their 10 o'clock news for the next morning. So taking content that we've spent a lot of time working on and placing it in other places that help tell stories.
Right.
So in a sense, we're borrowing that idea, I think, in this arena too. I get the idea from your blog post that we can definitely speed up brainstorming. That if we were to go into a room and start brainstorming some creative idea, we could go off the rails pretty quickly, as you can see from this discussion. So it helps focus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love using AI in that way to get the best out of me and get me thinking. And I think it's called, is it the Socratic
Method, yeah.
method, yeah, where it asks, you get the AI to ask you questions,
Yeah.
to then bring it out, and that's a great way to bring out your own authentic storytelling skills as well, because AI doesn't have the human experience. It can just, it's sort of trained on stuff on the internet, but as I said, it's that human sparkle that it does not have, and so getting it to bring that out of you is a really great way to do that.
Yeah.
So you also said 5 creative idea variations. How do we set our own policies, rules, guardrails, so that we ultimately inject our own human intelligence and creativity into the final work product?
Well, I think like when you're looking at, setting your own policies, I think like what you would want to kind of look at is internally, like what are your absolute do's and what are your absolute don'ts? Like what is the line? Like in any kind of ethical policy, like we have one for PR professionals, there's one for advertising or marketing. So there's certain things like I will use AI to help me with brainstorming or bring out my human sparkle, but I will not use it for these kind of tasks. I think it's important to kind of like have that understanding yourself, like what are the lines you're not going to cross, but then also like what are some things that you will continually do to help yourself internally within your own understanding, your own education and best practices, but then what are your roles holistically to help out this, the community, the industry, like what are ways in which you will promote your thought leadership and help others like in navigating this, change in technology. So like one thing that I have told my students is like, I want to definitely better understand and be a student of life, for looking at AI. I'm constantly learning, but I also want to make sure whatever I'm learning, I'm sharing with my students and not gatekeeping that. So that's one policy that I have.
So there's almost a Grand Canyon that I'm seeing here between what you're saying about creativity and at least the early survey results that say a majority of people feel AI will erode rather than improve people's ability to think creatively and form meaningful relationships. Is any of that a worry?
Well, I mean, from the research I did for my AI book, it was the opposite. It was, people thought that it helped people to be creative. So I think if you've got an idea in your head and an imagination, but you can't get that out, whether it's in writing or video or images, AI can now help you to do that in a way that, it's made it so much more accessible. But then on the flip side of that, if we're just using AI for that creativity and we're not working with it as a partner, collaborating with it, and getting it to do the whole process, then I think there's an issue. Yes. And I think if we're using it in terms of building relationships, if we're using the writing and just using it to generate emails, for example, I hope this message finds you well. Like if I read that one more time, I hope this email finds you well. My students, as soon as I see that when my students send it to me, I know they've used AI. They're usually asking for an extension on their assessment. But like I turn off because I can see it's AI. So I think we still need to be very present in what we're writing, particularly to other people, so we have that human connection still, because that's, I think, where we're losing it. Everyone's using AI to communicate with each other, and no one's really connecting anymore. And I keep seeing, like on LinkedIn, an AI agent commenting on my LinkedIn post, and then another AI agent will comment on that. And I'm like, what is the point? It's social media. We're supposed to be social, and it's about building relationships. If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. But don't send your AI agent.
But the AI agent has an ability to do that, so we can expect people will do that.
They will do that, but I don't like it. Yeah, I just think it sort of defeats the purpose of social media.
But it goes back to like also what Dennis and Karen were talking about was the education. Like I think that, like if people know, like, if they just assume, it will hurt relationships, it will hurt this, like there's also that flip side. And so that's where education comes in. It's like maybe saying, don't use AI agents to foster. Like it's about when you use AI and when you don't use AI. Like I think that people want that authentic relationship. And in the age that we're in with technology, I think people will kind of crave those authentic, like, I got a phone call from Dennis, or I got a personalized note from Karen. I think that there's going to be more emphasis on that. But it's about how and when you use it.
I approach it as it's a first draft generator. So it might do the first draft, and then I go in and tinker and make it my own.
Yeah. Well, with your whole email, like that's actually been something that my students have admitted to. They're like, I use it for email. But I'm like, well, do you use like the first draft? And they're like, no, like there's sometimes where I like put everything in and then it makes it polished. But then like they really kind of use it as a like a brainstorming and saying, okay, this
Yeah.
is something that I can use. So I think it's important to not, like, as you said, like, you input what you.
I mean, from a strategic and PR perspective, it can be very good if you have to write an email that you know what you want to say, but you know you shouldn't say it, and then it can make it smoother and polish
Yes.
it in a better way for you
Yes.
to get your point across, but in a softer way.
Yes,
So-
do the PR spin on it.
Yeah.
So
It's good like that.
And yet, there are at least a few pioneering CEOs out there who want the agency to have a single brand voice. My voice, basically, is what they're saying. And we're going to use AI so that your communication sounds like the firm. Is there a middle ground? That seems like an extreme position to
It
me.
is an extreme, because when you look at like the changes that we're seeing, like with influencer marketing, the fastest growing area that we're seeing being emphasized is employee brand advocacy. It's like, okay, if you want employees to sell their story, and if they sound like a company, they're going to be basically a paid spokesperson. So they're missing out that human element that makes the employees special.
The
So
authenticity,
Yeah.
the engagement
Yeah.
that we've
Exactly.
talked about for years on social
Yeah.
media.
Well, people
So-
buy from people, they don't buy from businesses. And we went through that, if you remember, with social media, where people wouldn't, it would just be the corporate speak, and
Yeah.
no one would put their name to it, and it didn't go very well.
Didn't go well, yeah. And I think with like the Edelman Trust Barometer, it'll be very interesting to kind of see like where AI agents and basically where they fall on the trust barometer, like where they stand in terms of what people trust. Like if they trust an AI influencer or an AI agent versus, someone else. And so it'll be interesting to see how those changes over the years.
And to me, it's a question of appropriateness. When I call the cable company to get something fixed, I would rather have a chat bot if the chat bot can get it done very quickly. I don't necessarily want to have a long conversation in that kind of exchange. But yeah, social media, it seems to me, often is a different context.
Well, and I think too, even in a crisis, like like you do see some statements. You're like, clearly this was either written by a lawyer or ChatGPT, and I think people are kind of picking up on that. And so, from a crisis standpoint, like you really want to be authentic and real, like saying, okay, this is what's going on. If they think there's any kind of forced, kind of language that's not true to themselves, if people are going to be like completely discounting it. It's like, okay, yeah, this is a prepared statement. This is not you. So I think there is, that time and place when you want to use it.
The journalists still want to talk to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll, I suppose, take the information you give them that's automated, but they would like to talk to human beings still.
Yes.
I mean, they still wanted you on CNN.
Yeah.
They didn't send your AI agent there.
They'll send the Optimus bot. It'll be like Westworld. Can't tell.
So, I know none of us have a crystal ball. We're almost out of time. I think in the remaining 2-3 minutes, project out 5-10 years. Where do you think we're going to be, and what challenges and opportunities does that vision present?
Gee, I think particularly in social media, it will be so personalised. I think we'll see ads that have been created just for us based on what we're doing. Like at the moment, you can target certain audiences, say using meta ads, but I think the actual ad themselves will be crafted around. So I think the advertising we see will be very, very targeted based on what we're doing and what our preferences are. I think it will be
Which implies targeted at the information that's been collected about us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, AI is very seductive in the sense that it's easy to go to ChatGPT and get it to answer all of our questions, even though it gives us the wrong answer sometimes. So I think being very mindful of that, I think that's going to get easier and easier and easier. So I think we need to be very mindful about and very critical in the way that we use it, and have those, those guardrails in place of when we'll use it and when we won't. It's like with social media, when you're going to have those time limits on and things like that. So I think we will need to be very careful about how we use it.
And Dennis, in your example, it sounds like AI is already getting to know you very well.
It knows me well because, like this morning, I uploaded stuff from my iPhone 16 to the 17, and it had to move over 70,000 images and videos, which is
I thought that
like
was
2
bad.
terabytes of stuff. And so I view it as, so people are like AI this and AI that. Well, the same wave happened when the internet happened and social media happened. It's an amplifier, and those people who get ahead the rich get richer, and these other people get left behind, and this gap it increases. So I view it this way. because AI can beat you at chess or whatever, it can beat you at video editing, it can beat you at all this other stuff, where is it that you can win? Each of us should ask ourselves, where is it that we can win our unique advantage, right? What is our niche? What are our relationships? What are things that we have done? What are our skills and talents? Ask the AI that. And the quality of the answer is based on the depth of context that it has about understanding your relationships, what you like to do, your experience. If it doesn't know who you are, if I Google Karen Sutherland, and I don't know much about Karen Sutherland, like what can the AI do with that? So I know, I'm preparing for something that hasn't happened. It won't be for another 5 years. But I've been gathering, it's like, Noah's building the ark and everyone's like, oh, who are you? Like, dude, it's coming, right? Mm-hmm. I've collected all this stuff because I know that day will come where those assets, those relationships that I've built over time will have a multiplying effect when the tools get to that point. Mm-hmm. Because that's when we stand out. When everyone else is generating copies of, oh, did that musician really sing that? We're gonna be up here instead of playing those kinds of games. So what are the relationships that we can build now that when the flood happens, we will be protected? And that's what I'm thinking about. And I think all of us should be building our personal brand. We should be working on those things that AI can't do right now, which is build real relationships with people, like in podcasts, going out to dinner without our phones, but actually having a real conversation. That's the stuff that will prepare us, which is funny because that's the exact opposite of what you'd expect to hear from a search engine engineer or some AI expert, right?
Yeah.
I'm just hoping by 5 years we'll have AI to do laundry.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That's I have friends at GE. I'm like, okay, like this needs to happen. But no, seriously. But I think along with Karen and Dennis, they've shared some great points. And I think like ultimately where I see the field going is like that emphasis on like the offline interactions and offline connections, because at the end of the day we are having shared human experiences. AI will have a part of what we're doing, but it can't replace like the uniqueness and the brain power that we have. So I think there's a lot that we can bring to the table. We can continually do that, but as every technology wave comes up, everyone's going to say, oh, the calculators like in the 90s are going to be, impacting, this and the internet and social. And so all of us have kind of had this kind of understanding over the years. That's where being vintage, as my students call me, or as an elder millennial, that like seeing kind of these waves come forward. And so if you're kind of prepared for what Dennis mentioned, this next wave, like kind of be a student of the event, like student of the field, and really investing your time and energy, kind of understanding the landscape. I think that's really important to be prepared. But yeah, I think that there will be future waves, but it's about kind of solidifying those fundamental skills of being curious, being, like asking the right questions, talking to the right people, building your, connections and understanding and being able to share. I think all of those will help prepare you for the future.
This 90 minutes went very fast,
Yeah.
and we covered a lot of ground. I would encourage the audience to follow these leaders in the field, because this is going to keep changing, and for you to have literacy, you can't just stop today. You have to keep watching as change happens, because I think what you're suggesting is it's going to get to a much higher level very quickly. Yes. And it's very difficult, as we talked about, for regulators to set those guardrails. We've got to be our own rules makers, setting those rules going forward and using it in ways that we're comfortable with in our own ethics and our organization's ethical rules. Well, thank you very much for doing this. Let's thank our excellent panel here, our audience. And if you're out there online, we'll have recordings up for you to tell friends about. We'll be adjourning to the lobby where you'll have an opportunity, students, to talk one-on-one with these very clever folks. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.